It's starting to feel like Groundhog Day in the city of Philadelphia again. I mean, the Sixers made it through the first round pretty easily. They're either going to be playing the Celtics or Hawks. And of course, Joel Embiid is out with another injury after the first round. I would say the only difference is that the Sixers seem to have a competent center for the first time in a while, but that's only as long as Doc Rivers continues to play him. We'll get into that, plus the Phillies' recent success and the Eagles draft that is coming up this week on this episode of Sports Talk Philadelphia. Welcome back to Sports Talk Philadelphia. As always, I'm your host, Aidan, and unfortunately, Mike couldn't join us this week, so we're back with the same panel we had that last week in Libby, Gilliland. Libby, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Doing pretty well. And Shane Nolan. Shane, how are you doing?
I'm doing good.
So we'll talk to Shane in a little bit with the Phillies, but we're going to start this week for the first time in a while with the Sixers, who again had a great series against the Nets until Game 4. But they swept the Nets 4-0, first sweep that they've had since 1991, which we talked about last week. They held the Nets under 100 points in 3 out of the 4 games, and the only game that the Nets scored over 100, they only scored 101. And Tobias Harris was pretty much the star and really showed out in this series, scoring 18.7 points per game. Libby, this was a very good series all around for a lot of different players.
Yeah, it was. You know, this was Tobias Harris's step-up moment. He has been pretty consistent all year, but Embiid goes out, you have to have guys to step up in general in the playoffs, but especially in that Game 4, and he really stood out. You know, you've got Reed playing really, really well, so it was a little discombobulated in Game 4, but, you know, shout out to the Nets franchise because they probably shouldn't have made it to the playoffs. And, you know, they put up a good fight. They shot 44% from the field, 32% from 3. Not too shabby for them, but the Sixers shot a little bit better, played a little bit harder, and, you know, we have more talent than the Nets, so I'm really glad that we got that sweep. We can get the rest and move forward from here because we have some work to do.
Yeah, the Sixers do have a lot of work to do. One of the biggest pieces is that James Harden has been inconsistent at certain points in this series, although he did really step up with Embiid's absence. Tyrese Maxey has become pretty much the superstar on this team outside of Embiid. And then you have guys like Anthony Melton who consistently step up off the bench. This feels like one of the best teams that the Sixers have had in a very, very long time.
It absolutely does. You know, Maxey's been kind of that guy that's the young energy, and I've always loved watching him play, you know, at Kentucky and with the Sixers, and now he's really coming into his own and becoming more of a leader and not just under James Harden. You know, I know that James Harden has helped him develop a lot, but as Harden goes on his tangents and drama, Maxey's stepping up and you know, holding his own. So really proud of him, and the way that Harden stepped up when Embiid was out was great as well, Aidan. And you know, you've got Paul Reed that's stepping up in a huge way in all assets. You know, he's bringing so much energy, which is what this team needs, because playoffs are stressful and you're going to have guys get hurt. And we've seen that with Embiid, and I was not shocked that that happened. But, you know, you got to move forward, and I'm really glad that there's a lot of weapons on this team to go to on the bench, because we didn't really have that last year.
Yeah, the Embiid injury, it does hurt the team a lot. Thankfully, the Sixers did win in Game 4. Paul Reed was a big factor of that. But when you look at Embiid, he's out with a knee injury right now, missed Game 4. They don't know when he's coming back. During the series, he averaged 20 points per game, 11.3 rebounds per game, and 4 assists per game, which for a center, those are just amazing stats. Paul Reed in the final game, 10 points, 15 rebounds, and 2 assists in Game 4. He had a very, very good game, and it is important that he steps up with this Embiid injury.
Yes, it absolutely is. He's not Embiid, but we've seen it, you don't need that. Of course, Embiid is our MVP. It's pretty obvious, but if you can have guys like Reed step up and fill those gaps, you have enough talent around him to win a few games. I don't know if it's championship worthy, but they have a better shot than they would have last year with these kind of weapons, and with Doc giving him the opportunity finally to play and really show himself, and I think he'll get better as this playoffs move forward.
Yeah, when you look at the Embiid injury, it's definitely not good. He's out with a sprained LCL, not torn, thankfully, but sprained LCL. That means that he's going to be out most likely Game 1, which thankfully now is on Monday, so there is a chance that he's back. There's rumors that he's going to be wearing a brace. Some people say he's not. there's a lot of information out there, Libby, and it's hard to figure out where Embiid is at this point.
Yeah, and you can't necessarily dwell on it at this point. I'm really glad they got that sweep. They have time now to rest him and he can recover and not have to worry about, I'm missing this game, missing that game. So shout out to the Celtics for really stretching this series out. But it's something that's very worrisome. He's your guy. But how do you move forward without him? Because you have to assume at this point he's not coming back for a couple games. Okay, how do you improve off of game 4? You saw kind of your lineups, who stepped up, who can play even better, how do you fill those gaps, and try to win a game against the Celtics before you get Embiid back.
Yeah, I definitely think that Paul Reed is going to be a huge factor with that. James Harden's going to have to step up. Tyrese Maxey is going to have to continue to do what he's been doing. So there is a lot of good things the Sixers are doing. They're just going to have to work around this Embiid injury, who was struggling up until the injury. So obviously it shows that the Sixers can play well together without him. And like Libby mentioned, a lot of the other teams in the East have really been struggling. The Celtics, who everyone pretty much assumed would either get a gentleman's sweep and win in 5 or just cleanly sweep the Hawks, only have a 1-game lead after 5 games, up 3-2. The biggest shocker out of the entire probably playoffs in general is that the Heat are beating the Bucks 3-1. The Heat were the 8th seed, really struggled this year. Jimmy Buckets too, getting 56 points in the Game 4 win. And then you have the Knicks beating the Cavs 3-1. I thought that was going to be a 7-game series. So it is interesting, Libby, to see how the playoffs at this point have shaken up.
Yeah, it's been shocking. I mean, okay, Jimmy Butler, I see you. He's a talented player. There's a little drama there with him being on the Sixers a few years ago, but very talented player, and they're playing great. So if you want to knock out the Bucks for us, thank you. That's great. I do worry about playing them a little bit if we get to that point, but I think what's next up is the Celtics, who are shooting 50% from the field right now. Tatum's averaging about 27 points a game. That's who you're going to have to stop. You got Marcus Smart playing really well, so they have a lot of weapons, just like we have weapons, and if we're missing Embiid still, it's going to be a really tough series. If the Celtics do win at this point, it's a toss-up, but that's how I'm feeling it's going to go. And either way, they're going to have to really hunker down and do some work in these next couple of days and figure out what their game plan is and what Doc Rivers is going to do to get his team ready to play what could be a 7-game series.
Yeah, definitely some drama with Jimmy Butler leaving the 76ers. Still will not forgive Embiid for being the big reason why he left, but I've talked about Embiid enough Ben Simmons the last couple of weeks. Don't want to stop talking about Embiid, but definitely Ben Simmons I want to leave behind. Libby, you did mention the fact that the Sixers will probably be playing the Celtics, but the Hawks have played very, very well. And it's a team that the Sixers struggled against 2 years ago. Trae Young is looking like that type of player. If you do have to play the Hawks, that is not going to be an easy series considering what has happened.
No, absolutely not. And the Sixers do not fare well in second-round playoff series. So either way that it goes, it's not going to be easy. The Hawks are a very talented team. Trae Young drives me absolutely insane, but you can't deny he's a good player. We struggle against him. And we struggled a lot against that series and ended up losing it. So, again, there's just a lot of factors to it. Who can step up? And we have a bench this year. There's talent, but it's going to be about not having drama. We played the 6th seed and there were ejections. So how do we calm it down, tame ourselves, and just play basketball? And Doc, I hope, can do something to kind of keep that in check and keep especially James Harden in check moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, Doc's rotations have been very good. The drama for James Harden being ejected was not great, but we'll see what happens in the next series and see if this Celtics-Hawks series wraps up soon or goes to a Game 7. We're now going to move on to the Phillies, who last week I complained about not playing well. They actually stepped up this past week. Granted, the teams they played were not great, but they were able to beat the White Sox in a 2-1 series, and then had a 4-game series against the Rockies where they lost the first game really badly, didn't score a run in the first 14 or 15 innings against the Rockies, and then ended up winning the series 3-1 before dropping the opener to the Mariners. But they're still 11-13. That's a much improved record than where they were at. And Shane, I just want to ask you, what has been the biggest factor for the Phillies' recent success?
I feel like as you were watching the highlight right there, you have Trey Turner kind of hitting a little bit now. JT Realmuto, I mean, he has struggled the past like 2 games or so, but you kind of see him starting to get going as well. And these are the guys that you're going to need to get going. You have Kyle Schwarber who hit a big home run in the second, I think it was the second game against the Rockies, and like those are the guys at the top of your lineup who have been struggling recently. So those are the guys who are going to need to start helping the Phillies continue to win.
Yeah, so all of those highlights that we just saw were from Sunday's game where the Phillies hit a combined 4 home runs. This was a team that has a very high on-base percentage, high batting average, but was not getting a lot of home runs. The fact that they're coming in bunches at this point, Libby, that is a good sign because, well, something that the announcers talk about, especially John Cook, is that hitting is contagious. When one guy hits a home run, pretty much the entire team will follow.
Yeah, it absolutely is. They have a .336 on-base percentage right now, which is incredible for them. And Marsh is leading the team at .357 batting average. So, you know, you've got these guys stepping up, and the biggest problem for them has been leaving runners on base. It is so frustrating the first few games to see how many batters they left on base, and the home runs, that's a run. So it's a way to get them started, and, you know, you're not leaving guys on second and third. And, yeah, like you said, it is contagious, and I'm glad that they're pulling it together and getting some runs on the board.
Yeah, I think something that is really important is that they were not scoring with runners on base. They hit 2 home runs in the late innings that were 2-run home runs. So when you look at that, Shane, it is good to see that there's guys hitting home runs with guys on base, and it's guys deep in the batting order, it's guys early in the batting order. It seems like it's everyone, and Imunu Sosa hit one last night too. So it's not just coming from your star players, it's coming from pretty much everywhere.
No, and that's what you need. The 2 guys who hit those home runs were Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh, who are essentially your 2 best hitters right now on the team. And those are the younger guys. And so far, I mean, for the whole season, they have been stepping it up so far. And that's what you need. You need this whole team get going at once. That's something problem they've had in previous seasons. And also, I mean, Christian Pache. I mean, Kevin Long has been working with him, and he's been hitting pretty well as well so far. So that's something that needs to keep going.
It'll be interesting to see if the Phillies can get Pache at all in the lineup. Maybe they'll move him to the outfield until Bryce Harper can come back, who seems like he's going to come back much sooner than everyone thought, which is just great news for the Phillies, considering the fact that they are in 4th place right now. They're, like I said, they are playing better, and the Marlins seem to be coming back to earth. They're now at 500. The Mets are only 4 games over 500, and the Braves, well, they are the best team right now in the National League. But they're still only at 16-8, and the Phillies are not that many games behind them, only 5 back, and they're now 2 up on the Nationals. So, Shane, when you look at where they're at right now, it is a much better feeling than earlier in the season.
It is, and also the fact that you brought up Bryce Harper, who can possibly be back in the lineup by May 1st when they see when they go to LA, because he's going to be seeing a doctor there, and if he's cleared to be able to slide head first, he will be in the lineup most likely. And that's what they need, especially with the road trip that they have coming up. Right now, they have 2 games left against the Mariners, and then all 3 series they have coming up are against playoff teams. You got the Astros after this, and then you have LA, as I mentioned, and that's something that's going to be a daunting task for them, and it's going to be something that I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of right now, but it's going to be they're just going to have to get through this road trip.
Yeah, it is going to be a tough road trip, and I think the most important one will be that rematch from last year's World Series against the Astros. Players are going to be very amped up about that. You don't have Bryce Harper in this lineup, but those memories are going to stick with you, and I think, Libby, that if they struggle in that road trip, that could be very dire for how the rest of the season goes.
It could be. You know, you won 2 series in a row, which is really great for their momentum, but okay, you had a homestand and now you're traveling, so how do you keep that momentum going on the road? It's going to be a true test of how talented this team is, and if they can continue to perform, you know, in these next few weeks. It'll be interesting to see, and hopefully Harper comes back soon, because I think he's kind of the jump start that they need to really continue the momentum they have.
Yeah, one of those guys that's really going to have to step up is Aaron Nola, who did pitch better in his no decision with the Rockies, but he only made it into the 7th inning once in that game. He's allowed 3 or more runs in 4 out of his 5 starts, and his record is 1-2 with a 5.40 ERA. Look, Nola's not a guy that gets a lot of wins, considering that a lot of the time the offense just never seems to step up for him. But Shane, that ERA is just not where it needs to be at this point.
No, it's not. And with this start, hopefully it's encouraging to see that he did pitch well. I mean, he did give up a 3-run home run in the first inning, but after that, he settled down and he was able to pitch well and pitch into the 7th inning, which, like you said, he hasn't done so far this season aside from that game. But this is something that we have seen from him before. He pitches well for a couple games and then he reverts back to not being able to pitch well into that 4th, 5th inning, getting people on base, and he just falls apart. So hopefully this is an encouraging start for him and we can see this continue.
Yeah, and Libby, I'm interested to hear your opinion on why he's struggling. A lot of people have said it's the pitch clock. It could be the fact that he's on a contract year right now, and there's not a whole lot of talks about him being re-signed until the end of the season. There's a lot of pressure on him to succeed, especially considering how the team did last year. And at this point, until the Rockies game, he really just was not stepping up to the plate for that.
Yeah, and the two factors that you mentioned, Aidan, are the two that stood out to me as well. You know, I think a lot of pitchers are struggling with the pitch clock. It's a huge adjustment, kind of gets you out of your rhythm. And if that's an issue, hopefully he's starting to adjust because they're going to have to. But like you said, it is a contract year. That puts a lot of pressure on him, especially if you get off to a bad start. You know, you're kind of hustling to try to get yourself back to where you were, and he could just be putting too much on himself to perform too well and, you know, overthinking things. And hopefully he can pull it back together. And, you know, like we said, you've got a bunch of games on the road, so it's going to be tougher. But, you know, he's one of your seasoned guys. You've got to think that if anybody's going to pull it together, it's got to be him.
And Shane, do you think that adding Ranger Suarez back to rotation will alleviate some of that pressure on Aaron Nola right now?
I think it might. I mean, Suarez, this is a guy that you kind of do need back in this rotation because of how well he pitched last season. I mean, it shouldn't really have to because Aaron Nola is supposed to be your quote-unquote ace of the staff, and if that's the way he has to think, that another pitcher coming back might relieve some of the stress. I mean, that's not the mentality you want to have as a 1 or 2 starting pitcher.
Yeah, for the Phillies to do well, like I said, Nola will have to step up. It'll be very eye-opening to see how the Phillies play in this road trip. And it could be sort of the jump start or the end to their season, even though it is, again, still very early on. We're now going to jump to a team that 2.5 months ago lost a very tragic game in the Eagles, losing to the Super Bowl. And it didn't feel like, or doesn't feel like that was 2.5 months ago. But we are now ready for the NFL draft, and the Eagles are stacked and ready to go. They have 2 picks in the first round, one 10th overall, the other 30th. They also have picks in the 2nd and 3rd, and then nothing until the 7th round. So there is a lot of early picks for the Eagles, and then really nothing until that last round. So, Libby, what are the Eagles going to have to do to make sure that these picks early on count, because you don't have a lot of picks later on?
Yeah, they don't have a lot of picks later on, and I think that's okay for this team right now. There was rumors that they were going to trade up to try to get Jalen Carter, which with some recent circumstances, I could see him falling a few picks. But, you know, I think if they can get him, great. If not, I don't think it's a deal breaker. There's a lot of talent in this draft, but there's a lot of talent on this Eagles team too. So I think you're just trying to use a spot that you have to gain a weapon or two and, you know, use that to the best of your ability, but don't do anything ridiculous to try to trade up or give up too much at this point.
It is very sort of interesting to see that the Eagles do not have a lot of needs right now. There's been rumors that maybe they'll go for a cornerback, but that's not something they desperately need. And when you look at what a lot of teams do in the draft, is they just go for the best talent. So the 2 players with the best talent that the Eagles have the most likely chance of getting is Bijan Robinson, the running back for Texas, who had 1,580 yards last year, 18 rushing touchdowns for Texas, and then Jalen Carter, who Libby mentioned, 3 sacks, 7 tackles for loss, 32 total tackles. Just an absolute dominant threat as the defensive tackle. There's also rumors that the Eagles could try trading for Derrick Henry as well with one of these picks. So the Eagles have a lot of options. Libby, I'm going to start with Bijan Robinson. Just an absolute stud for Texas. Has talked a lot about wanting to play for a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, a team like the Eagles. Running backs typically don't go this high, but we haven't really seen a running back in a long time like Bijan Robinson.
Yeah, and you don't have Miles Sanders anymore, so I could certainly see them doing that. At this point, they're going for the best players, and if he's one of the best players in the area that they need, I think it's a no-brainer. Extremely talented player, and that's kind of what they're looking at right now. You need a running back, somebody to support Jalen Hurts, because we saw how much Miles Sanders impacted the team, even though Jalen Hurts is a mobile quarterback. So I love that pick. If you can get him, I think that's where they should go.
Yeah, and when you look at the Eagles' running back depth, it's there, but not really. Rashard Penny's a great running back. He just can never really stay healthy, and we don't really know what Gainwell is when he gets more touches than he usually does in the red zone or as a third down threat. So it would be great to see another running back. The other guy that was mentioned, Jalen Carter, was projected to go top 5, and unfortunately there was circumstances at Georgia where he was part of a very deadly incident where he was put on community service. A lot of teams are sort of hesitant to go after him. The Eagles really talked a lot about how much in depth they looked into this background, looked into the incident. The fact that they're still comfortable going after him with a team that's not really goes after guys with a lot of controversy, that says a lot to me.
It does. And one of the things I was going to say is that you don't want a lot of controversy on your team. You know, it takes away from the team dynamic, and you see how much Jalen Hurts has stepped up to improve just the overall camaraderie of this team, and he's such a great guy. So if you bring that in, you're going to have a lot of media and a lot of questions surrounding that. But if they do their due diligence and they think, hey, this is still our guy, I trust them because they haven't made too many bad decisions like that in the past.
Yeah, they're not really a team that wants to do that. We sort of say that that's what the Cowboys do, and the Eagles are the ones that make the smarter decisions. But it will be sort of intriguing to see who they go after. Derrick Henry's also very intriguing decision if they decide to trade one of those first-round picks for a running back that's a little bit older, but it's still very, very talented.
Yeah, and I love that because that's the flexibility that they have with these early picks and not really needing a young guy necessarily. So, you know, if that's the direction that they want to go, I still like the running back pick, whatever that decision may be. And, you know, I like that they have the flexibility to do that.
Yeah, sort of getting a lot of those draft picks, it makes it much more easier for the Eagles to decide to trade down, trade up, and not just have to rely on 2 picks to land, especially with the way that the roster is built. They definitely don't have to do that. We're now going to jump to our final segment, Fast Five, and we'll start with our always favorite segment, Talking Baseball with Shane Nolan.
Yeah, not only are Pirates fans happy with the start of their season leading the NL Central right now, but yesterday the Pirates just signed their outfielder Brian Reynolds to an 8-year, $106.75 million deal after rumors of him being traded trying to be traded last offseason, especially the Yankees, and rumors that he wanted out of Pittsburgh and stuff like that. So this is a good signing for the Pirates.
Yeah, one of those teams that has never signed a player with a contract over $100 million is my second favorite baseball team in the Chicago White Sox. So come on, guys. I know you signed Benintendi for $75 million this year, but we got to sign one of these young guys for something more than that, considering that you're right now on pace with spending of the Oakland Athletics, which I will get into, is not really something that you want to talk about. But we're now going to go to basketball. Libby, we talked a lot about the teams in the East, especially the Heat and Celtics. Both of those teams have beat the Sixers before. Which team worries you the most?
Both of them worry me a lot. The Celtics, I think, because that's who we're ultimately going to play. I'm thinking that's the way that it's going to go. So you have to worry about Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart, who are very, very talented basketball players who are going to put a lot of pressure on this weak lineup that we have without Embiid. We still have a pretty talented team, but they do scare me a lot. Jimmy Butler, I mean, I don't even know what to say. And I think either way, there's just so much tension with these teams. And if you go in a 7-game series, I worry that we can't hold it together.
Yeah, I mean, both, like you mentioned, both these teams have tension with the Sixers. Jimmy Butler, that's a pretty notable one. And just the fact that the Celtics are the Sixers' biggest rivals historically. The Celtics have always had the upper hand, or at least it seems like over the Sixers, have knocked them out of the playoffs multiple times in the last decade or so. So it would be nice to get revenge on them, but again, not really a matchup I want to get. And the Hawks, too, is a team that scares me as well if they're able to get past the Celtics. So none of these teams are that enjoyable to worry about. But we're going to go back to Libby with a non-basketball question and talk about her favorite quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, who just got traded to the Jets.
Not my favorite quarterback. I was a Packers fan growing up, so I did look up to him a lot. But thank goodness he is out of Green Bay. that was just a lot of drama for the entire franchise. I'm really excited to see Jordan Love play. He has been sitting on the bench for so many years waiting for his opportunity with no love from Aaron Rodgers, no pun intended. But I'm so thrilled that he's going to get his shot. And interesting from Aaron, he posted, "This will not be my last time in Green Bay." So I don't know what he's scheming to come back. I don't want it. But we'll see. Best of luck to him in New York, and go Packers.
Yeah, this might also be the best quarterback that the Jets have had, I would argue, ever. Well, I would say especially since Joe Namath, but I would say ever. I think Rodgers is better than Namath, but that is something for Jets fans to debate about, not us. Shane, we're going to go back to you. You are our hockey sort of concierge here. What is the team that has shocked you the most in the NHL playoffs so far?
So far, the New Jersey Devils, they were down in their series 2-0 against the Rangers, losing both games at home, and then coming into Madison Square Gardens for game 3 and 4, beating the Rangers in those games to tie the series up, just because they're such a young, inexperienced team, and because they switched their goaltending for those 2 games, and a young goaltender in Smith. So that's very surprising to me.
Yeah, the one that shocks me the most, I'm going to go with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They really did not play well in the game 1 against Tampa Bay, and now have won 3 straight and look to win their first playoff series in, how long has it been?
I honestly
it was like 30
think
years?
2000, early 2000s. I think
Yeah, so
might
it's
have
been like 25 or
I
30. It's just amazing that they were down by that much. They always seem to lose in the first round. The fact they finally seem to, at this point, clinch the series is very good news for them. We're finally going to go to a team that announced some very sad news in the Oakland Athletics, that they will be moving to Vegas. This is just a complete failure by the ownership of Oakland, that they couldn't get a new stadium proposed, that every time they proposed a stadium, they basically were blackmailing the city to pay for it. I just can't ever side with ownership that won't privately fund their own stadium. The fact that they traded away the best players and basically blamed the fans for the reason why nobody showed up to a Coliseum that is falling apart. They basically pulled a major league, and fans are upset about them. There is literally a movie that shows ownership doing this and the players rallying around each other, and fans love that movie. Why you blame the other fans makes absolutely no sense to me. Ownership is the one that is the bad guys here in this story. And it sort of shows that another movie that's been mentioned from the A's, Moneyball, doesn't really work. It works well at certain points, but at the end of the day, you have to spend money to win. And that wraps up our show. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to tune in next week, and also make sure to follow us on social media at Instagram and Twitter at SportsTalk LTV. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Next week will be our final episode of the season, so definitely make sure to tune into that. And as always, go Phillies.